Welcome everyone, it's Michael DeHaan from Care to Grow. And I've got Nicole Bellisle here, co-founder of Collective Channel with Savannah Kruger. How you going, Nicole?
Great. Thanks so much for having me, Michael.
Thanks for coming. And Nicole's from Colorado, America, so looking forward to getting some insights from you. And I just thought that Nicole's a part of this Women's Empowerment series, really using your voice and visibility to create change. And Nicole's got a great story around that. I met Nicole and Savannah last week, and we just sort of went through what they're doing around empowerment, feminine leaders, and we're just so, I was just, so encouraged in regard to what you're doing and so excited about the future there. So looking forward to finding out a bit more about that.
Thank you.
And I think what really resonated with me when I met both you and Savannah was really around that, where we sit at the moment, which is that masculine sort of paradigm, very results driven, very assertive, ego driven, that there's a lot of burnout, and to bring in that sort of female qualities, the change, the 21st century change in regard to companies, and having that balance of feminine qualities and masculine qualities in sort of driving a business going forward, and creating those women that have got the power within to actually realise that and bring that out to the world, really. so,
Yeah.
so yeah, great work that you're doing. It was
Thank
very
you.
inspiring.
Thank you.
So I thought we'd start just to get to know you a little bit more. So I'm really interested in your story. I've heard it before, but it's just so encouraging. But just a little bit more about you personally, Nicole.
Yeah. So I guess I guess for me, my story really begins in the masculine paradigm in many ways. Being a young girl growing up in a context where business is so heroic in a sense. So I grew up with a very strong mother and saw her going to work in a beautiful business suit every day, and I thought that that's what success looked like. So was very conditioned into that, but even from a young age also knew that I wanted to do business differently. And so was very drawn to the sustainability movement, for example, women's empowerment movements, just seeing how my mom struggled as well to find her power in the workplace.
Yeah.
So when I after business school and studying entrepreneurship and sustainability, my career really started at Harvard University in Boston, and I got to do all kinds of incredible work with entrepreneurs and executives while I was there. And so deepened that context of what does success really look like in this masculine, traditional academic paradigm. And I did quite well there. Like I took that role on and was quite successful in that paradigm for a number of years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I suppose one of the research points that you spoke about at our last meeting was you've interviewed a lot of global CEOs, and some of the characteristics that they're sort of sharing moving forward to be a successful CEO. So I suppose that sort of leads into your story. So I don't want to steal your thunder, but but it'd be really great to sort of share that same sort of story that you
Yeah.
did before.
Yeah, I would love to. Yeah. And it's interesting. I've become attuned to both the CEO, executive level perspective, as well as the entrepreneurial founder level perspective, and have really been exploring where is leadership going is sort of the curiosity that I had after, studying innovation ecosystems around the world in my role at Harvard. And I was invited to work with a number of colleagues who I met in that position to basically launch this new organization called Leaders on Purpose. And that was a collaboration between Harvard University, the World Bank, and the London School of Economics. And we sought out to really understand, from this Fortune 100 CEO perspective, where is leadership going? What does it mean to do business in this new paradigm of purpose-driven leadership? And there were many things that that came out of that study, and that is available for free at leadersonpurpose.com. And that, that team is still doing amazing research and holding CEO summits in DC where these CEOs come in and really get to cross-pollinate. But what's interesting is that, we find ourselves in this global context where there is so much ambiguity and chaos, and things have become more unpredictable than ever. And so the leaders of the future need to be incredibly resilient and adaptive. And in this study, over and over again, these CEOs were reflecting on how purpose as a North Star to really align us helps us stay committed to the cause and helps us to show up over and over and over again, even in the hardest of times. So when things get tough, you still have that trust and that psychological safety and that sense of purpose in the workplace to show up even in the most difficult of moments. And what I love about those findings, and this is more my interpretation of these many interviews with these CEOs, is that many of the qualities that allow us to be more resilient and more adaptive as leaders are inherently feminine leadership qualities. And you see skill sets like sense making and empathy and deep listening and the relational or social skills of building resilience in community among a team. And so I see so much potential for more feminine leadership skills to really come online in the next decades. And to be clear, that's not limited just to women either. We all have these masculine and feminine essences within us. And so regardless of gender, we can learn to embody these in some really, really incredible ways moving forward.
And how would you sort of interact that? So at the moment, it's very male dominated in regard to the executive CEOs. So how do women start coming into that sort of arena and, as I said, showcase their skills and talents that they've actually got innately?
Yeah, it can be incredibly difficult. And so one of the things that I've learned is that in order to fully show up in our true feminine expression, there's a lot of self-healing and inner work that needs to happen. And there's a lot of cultural healing that needs to happen. So I've really come to believe that leadership starts with you as the individual. And so looking at that imposter syndrome and befriending your inner critic and learning what confidence really is, which I define as simply trusting yourself over and over and over again to show up and be authentic and say the difficult thing and give voice, to your truth. It's certainly not easy, but the more that we do this, the more comfortable we get in our bodies. The less fight or flight response we might have when we're in a boardroom filled with men, for example, which is a situation that I've been in quite a bit, or a male-run tech startup that is very masculine in its culture, which I've also been in a number of times. Yeah. And so I think, it starts with that self-healing. And then from there, you can really have these simple but humble experiments to prove to yourself over and over again that you can do this, because no one else is going to tell you that you can. And no one else is we can't wait for people to start valuing empathy. And while I think men can invite the female voice into the room more proactively, yeah, we still have to be able to, to offer ourselves proactively. And I think we can only do that if we're rooted in our confidence and in our power, really. And so, as you said, this whole movement is really about coming back to that power.
Yeah. Well, that's inspirational, because that's that inner work, isn't it? And that's how you show up. So thank you for sharing that. That's quite powerful. And is that a part of that sort of collective channel that you're working with in regard to women working together and actually telling their stories and supporting each other? Is that a part of that community? Or?
Yeah, it certainly is. It's very much founded on that on that as a value. And so, after having worked in this CEO study, and I've done a lot of work with Techstars, which is one of the more prominent startup accelerator programs out there in the world. And I've mentored and worked with just so many executives and startups over the years. And so Collective Channel is really all about how do we make that shift into a more integrated version of leadership, and how do we embody that now? Because I think so many of us we're tired of just talking about it, right? We're tired of the theory, and we're ready to start living it and doing the practices daily that allow us to be in our power and allow us to do business differently. So Savannah and I at Collective Channel are really taking our very sound business sense from all of those years, and we're combining it with this more feminine approach,
Yeah.
and translating that into business practices or leadership practices that really anyone can replicate and find their own version of, because that's important too. It's, we have to be able to customize these for context and attune ourselves to our particular context and culture. But our aim is to make it just as easy as possible for female entrepreneurs and executives to be leading, from this new place.
Wow. And can anyone look at that sort of Collective Channel? Can people join up to that, or what does that look like?
Yeah, so we do want to make it as accessible as possible. So there's a free community that we run, and so we have a monthly free call where people can join and embody with us some of these practices. So it's a new topic and a new practice every month. But then we also have a free resource library where we have written step-by-step practices, we have video practices. We're always, posting these online too, and being vulnerable to show up and share our stories and our own healing journeys. Because even as co-founders of a conscious company, we're still healing too. And so we're really putting that out there as well, so that people can see this new way in action. I think we learn by seeing how others do it, and then emulating or adopting that in our unique way. And so we're really committed to doing that through our content. And then of course we hold programs and workshops and all the rest.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. And
Of
I want
course.
to ask this question and you've pretty well answered it already, about women looking internal and then really bringing out and shining through. Is there any other tips that you give a young woman in regard to she's wanting to get ahead in corporate, wanting to be a true, authentic leader, and how to sort of show up and have that confidence earlier in life?
Yeah. So I would love to, answer this in terms of what I wish I heard, 5 years ago and earlier in my career. Because I think one of the things that no one is really saying to young women is that leadership starts with your body. And that might sound strange at first, but if we can learn to prime our bodies for leadership and manage our energy, I actually think that the best leaders manage their energy even better than they manage their time. And so as women, we're shamed for our bodies over and over again, whether we don't, meet the mold of feeling beautiful or looking a certain way. We're taught to sort of be ashamed of our menstrual cycles even. There's all of this control that happens over the female body. And so part of finding our power again is really coming back to the body's wisdom, because a lot of feminine leadership skills do rely on that somatic wisdom, where you're dropping in, you're feeling the energy in the room, or you're extending your consciousness out into others to feel empathy and to deeply listen. And so I think getting back to this connection with our feminine bodies is part of how we prime for leadership. And one of the bodies of work that we engage in at Collective Channel is actually syncing leadership practices with the menstrual cycle. which is something that isn't talked about very much. And so we look at, how do you sync your diet and your exercise and your leadership practices with the 4 phases of your cycle to actually build momentum as a leader in your company. Because in this world that is so, masculine dominated and linear, we've got this productivity obsessed
Yeah.
culture, especially in the US, and we're chasing this never ending growth. But if we don't actually honor these other seasons of life and slow down to really integrate and look at, well, what's not working, what do I need to let go of here, and then what do I then create in this next cycle or this next season. And women, because of the menstrual cycle, have an incredible potential to be more embodied in this cyclical way of living and leading. And so that's been a huge aha for us as we learn as co-founders to really embody feminine leadership as well. Because there's a lot of unique skills that attune us to nature and our connection
Yeah.
to nature and each other. And if we suppress this 50% of skills that are available to us collectively within leadership, then we're really missing this whole other half of our human potential.
Yeah.
And so to young female leaders, I would say, start with your body, prime that body for leadership, and do the deep work to do the healing around imposter syndrome, confidence, really valuing yourself. It can be hard to ask for what you're worth or price your services at a price that's truly in alignment with your value. So there's still a learning curve, but we're healing through feminine leadership. And I think the world is learning to heal its economic systems, its social systems, and planetary systems through business as one, mechanism for healing. And so if we can do, I think the best thing that we can do for our future is to do business and leadership more consciously.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things I've heard a few times, and I'm just seeing it out there in the universe, is this conscious leadership.
Yeah.
And I love the work that you and Savannah. It's just so important for leaders to have an awareness and a consciousness. We talked before last week about, generally speaking, 95% of people's life is in the subconscious, and
Mhm.
to lead from that aspect, which is, it's just your habits, your beliefs, your behaviours around that. So to really lift that consciousness and the awareness about what's going on, that's sort of shaping the new leadership. So I love what you and Savannah are doing in that space. So well done.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that too, because the other piece that I think is so prevalent for young female leaders is connecting with fear. And if we're operating, from a place of routine or just going with the masses, right? Like just kind of following the status quo, we're on autopilot. And so we're not necessarily putting ourselves in growth moments and moments to really be with our fear. And so, sometimes the fear shows up for a really valid reason. And we should always follow our intuition if something is truly not in alignment or unsafe or just, feels off. But I think when we seek to get out of the status quo and out of routine and really befriend our fear, like that's where growth can happen. And that's where we can discover these more conscious ways of being and be so present to the change that's happening and that we're wanting to become ourselves. And so, I think it's really important to turn that on, get out of that 90% and into that 10%.
Yes. Yeah. I totally agree. I couldn't agree more. So thank you, Nicole, for being a part of the series. I think you've just given so much value around and people thinking differently around where they are at, what they might need to do in regard to some inner work to be their true self, to shine in their true light, so to speak there. So I I'm just so grateful for you being a part of this series. As I said, young women around the world will get so much value out of this, so thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
And we'll catch up again, so I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you.